The story of the prodigal son is a story about the love of God who takes us back even when we've squandered everything we have. Another important element of the story are the habits of the young man, which are still common today: wasting money, living for today rather than planning for tomorrow, and not being prepared for the famine times of life were his downfall and ours as well. Then Jesus said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me.' So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all that he had, and he traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and he hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off, and he went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and he put his arms around him, and he kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one. Put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get that fatted calf and kill it. And let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead, and he is alive again. He was lost, and now he is found.' And they began to celebrate." The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O wise. We have a little video that hopefully will work, that will introduce the sermon theme, Wisdom and Finance. Can we get the lights, please? Well, this is week 2 in a 4-week series on enough. There is a longer bulletin insert in your bulletin today. I'm going to be referring to that, so if you can please take that out. We'll get into it in a little bit. And I've got, of course, our blue insert, which is kind of the sermon notes. But this is something for you to take home. Please don't put this back in your bulletin and leave the bulletin at the table. We got plenty of bulletins, okay, for the second service. This is meant to help you in your life, in your relationship with money. So please, please take this home. And we'll get into it in a little bit. Most of us have heard that story that was read this morning of the prodigal son. It's a parable taught by Jesus, told by Jesus, to illustrate one central idea, that God is like the Father, that God welcomes us home no matter how much we've squandered our lives, or we didn't read the part about the older son today, but no matter how much resentment we have toward our sibling who went and lived it up in Vegas. And it's noteworthy, today I'm going to really focus on the younger son and the habits of the younger son, because these are the things that set up the story. Without his squandering, without his wasteful living, you wouldn't have this story. The word prodigal literally means one who wastes money. Did you know that? You might have thought it's somebody who wanders away, but it's one who wastes money, and we're really good at that, as we'll get to in a minute. Well, was often true for rural families in this country, so it was true in the setting of the prodigal son, that inheritance was mainly property. It was a farm or a ranch where this prodigal could later on in life maybe have some sheep or goats or maybe grow some crops, and that would provide him with a living, with a livelihood. It was his 401k. It was his Social Security. There was nothing like that in those days, those kind of things we count on. And the wise thing for him to do is just to wait patiently until his father passes away, and then that inheritance comes to the two sons, like it often does today. But we see in the story that the younger son wants it now, not years down the road. He wants to go to Vegas and live it up with the prostitutes and with his friends, gamble his life away. And after some very painful conversation that isn't really laid out in the story that much with his father gives him the freedom to go and blow it. Don't you think the father knows what's coming? He sells his entire future for what he could have right now, in the moment. He wants to live it up today, not plan for tomorrow. But the problem with that way of thinking is that there's a famine always around the corner. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. Now, we know about famines, not necessarily maybe where we have nothing to eat, but that sap our finances. It might have been a layoff at work that was triggered by an economic downturn in our country, or a contract at Rockwell that didn't come through. Or more often, we have little famines where, let's say, the car breaks down and you get a bill for thousands of dollars, or you go to the hospital and you just spend a few days there, and boy, even after insurance, you're perhaps in trouble. And when the bill comes, we often find we don't have the money saved up to pay for it. The prodigal son didn't have MasterCard, but we do. And so when the famine hits, we pull out our plastic so often, and then we got to pay that off in addition to everything else we have to pay. And the hole just got a little deeper. Now, the turning point in the story for the prodigal is when it says he came to himself, or he hit bottom, as our friends in AA would say, and he realized he needed to change. And for us, it's often the same story. The pain in your tooth or in your body gets so bad that you finally give in and go to the dentist or the doctor. Or if the financial pain gets so bad, you say, I got to tighten my belt somehow. Maybe we need to talk to a financial advisor. Maybe we need to cut up some credit cards, whatever it might be. Let's see now for a while how we are like the prodigal in some ways, and how we can avoid landing in the pig pen. You ever noticed that the more money you make, the more of it seems to go to waste? Here's your 2 questions of the week for you today, okay? We'll give you 2 for the price of 1. First of all, on the left, what are your top 3 money wasters in your family, okay? Or in your family unit, whatever it is. And then on the right, what do you think are the top 3 money wasters for basically all Americans today? And there's a nice long list there for you to look through, which might help you on the question on the left. Okay, so take a little time, would you? Talk to each other, move around if you're by yourself today, find somebody to talk it through with that. What are your money wasters? Okay, let's see what the survey said, as a famous program said. Now, this study was done by the Halloum Company for the United States of Financial Waste, and they surveyed baby boomers, Gen Xers, and millennials. You people are off the hook here for the most part, because you don't waste money, right? Yeah, you bet. Okay. So here you see the top 3 for each category. Look that over. What do you notice? What's the top money waster for every group? Oh, isn't that interesting? And notice how the percentage goes up as the age goes down. Isn't that interesting? What's another common money waster among the 3? Uneaten food or wasted food, which often comes from impulse buying, which I'll get to in a minute. And then the other third one for each group kind of varies a little bit. Eating out is number 1 for a reason, isn't it? We have wonderful restaurants in this community, and I know a lot of you are probably going to go visit one after this service, or maybe at noon, perhaps for brunch. That's kind of our pattern, our family. You'll see us often over at Cheddar's at noon or 1 o'clock or so. It's kind of a celebration of being together. The food is so delicious there, right? They have these chefs that can make these very interesting things. And if you work still, in the morning, maybe you sleep in a little too late and you don't have the time to make a sack lunch. And so you go out to eat at noon with some of the people from work. Or you're tired at night from work or from school or whatever. And it's so easy to just say, either let's go to a restaurant or let's call in a pizza. And perhaps more than any other ones of these things, this one has really taken over in the last several decades. Anybody here like me that when I was a kid, we rarely ate out? You guys get this. Now the next group won't. But, eating out for all of us was a rare treat, wasn't it? It was not a 2, 3, 4 times a week thing at all. It was a rare treat, but now it's common. And then impulse buying, which I think is what's behind this uneaten and an expired food thing, is another way that money kind of slips through our fingers. And it's especially true if you send the husband to the store with or without a list. Okay, it doesn't really matter. I speak from experience. I get a little list with maybe 4 things on it, and I bring 10 things home, Why is that? Because, number 1, probably I was hungry when I went to the store, which is another rule you should never break. If you're hungry, don't go to the grocery store. Rule number 2, always have a list and stick to it when you go shopping. And then sales are another thing that really catch us, don't they? But who doesn't have a sale today? Kohl's always has a sale. You ever notice that? Every day of the year there's a sale at Kohl's. And whether it's a clothing item or some electronic thing that catches your eye, maybe at Target or through Amazon online, we often find our willpower is weak when it butts up against a 4-letter word, sale. On this longer insert, now take this out if you would, there are 6 financial principles that can help you dig out of the hole or not fall into the hole in the first place. And they're listed on the screen as well. And I gave a special attention to number 1, put God first in your living and giving. And here's a wonderful passage from 2 Corinthians chapter 9 that also appears, part of it, interestingly, in the inside of this beautiful brochure that is in your packet, particularly the last part of that. And it's interesting, we didn't plan this, this just kind of happens. Look at the last sentence there. God is able to provide you with every blessing in abundance, so that by always having enough of everything, you may share abundantly in every good work. There's a great promise. a great promise for you. And as you receive your packets today and consider how to respond to the challenges and opportunities of our congregation and also of our many mission partners, really give a thought to how you can participate in this through your giving. I know some of you use simply giving to accomplish giving off the top, let's say. I'm kind of old school, and when I get a paycheck from the church, I sit down and I write out 2 checks typically, if it's a 4-Sunday month, to this place. And I put them in the little yellow envelope and lick it and put it in our can, and then, like today, it's ready to go. My wife will bring it and pop it in to the plate later on this morning. However you do it, put God first. Put God first. And then prepare a budget, a spending plan. Again, if you go to this key financial principles, and on the back side of it, kind of on a sideways, there's a wonderful little tool here for you to take home and put in your toolbox. Maybe for you this is old hat, but maybe for some of you this is brand new. What? A budget? What's that? And there are some suggested percentages for how to limit your spending in some areas so that you can maximize maybe your saving or your giving in others. So I encourage you, now it's the start of a new month, so maybe look back just through October. Get out your checkbook or whatever and kind of figure out how much you spend on housing and on transportation and kind of see how does my story line up with this more budgeted way of looking at it. And then you look at the third principle on the screen, simplify your lifestyle, live below your means. Next Sunday, we're going to really drill down deep into that one. We're not going to take the time today. How can we simplify our life and live beyond or underneath our means? And then there's 3 more practical steps here listed. And some of you have heard of this guy, Dave Ramsey. Anybody ever read this book here? Nobody? Okay, go to Barnes & Noble and get it. Or order it on Amazon. Okay, I give this to every married couple that I work with as a wedding gift. Because finances are the #1 cause of marital problems today. And Dave Ramsey has a radio show, I think on WMT, AM 600, quite often. I don't know if it's every day or often. But this is a wonderful book filled with biblical principles and just wisdom. He went bankrupt and learned the hard way. He was a prodigal, he will tell you that, and learned the hard way how to maximize his giving and his living. And the first thing he would say to you is set aside an emergency fund, $1,000 minimum, so that when the car breaks down and you go to pay the bill, you don't have to pull out your plastic credit card and go further down, deeper in debt. But all you got to do is call the bank and say, roll over $800 to pay for that crazy car repair. And then the next time you get paid, build that thing right back up to $1,000. Then he says, pay off all the credit card debts you have, starting with the lowest balance first. He talks about the snowball effect. I don't know if anybody's ever tried this or done this, but let's say you have, 4 or 5 credit cards. You've got your MasterCard or your Visa, and maybe you got a Kohl's, and maybe you got a Target, and whatever. Let's say the lowest balance is $100 on the Kohl's. So what he would say is pay the minimums on the other ones, focus on that Kohl's card, and get it paid off as fast as you can. And when you do, either cut it up or put it away. Get it out of your purse or your wallet. And then with that, let's say you paid $50 to pay off that last balance due on the Kohl's card. Roll that $50 over to the next lowest bill. Maybe it's Target and you owe $200 on that. So add the $50. Do you get this? Add the $50 you just paid to Kohl's to the, let's say, $25 you paid to Target. And work on that one. And when you get that one done, cut it up or hide it, and then go to the third one. The reason he suggests that is because you get kind of a sense of accomplishment when you get that first one paid off. And then when the second one's paid off, you feel even better. And you feel like you're finally digging yourselves out of the hole. And then finally, practice long-range saving and investing habits. I'm going to give you some free advice. Okay? If you have children or grandchildren and you want them to go to college, learn about the Iowa 529 plan. Okay? We did that after we moved here. Before that, we'd been saving since Eric was a baby. And we plowed that money into a 529 plan, and we had plenty when Eric was ready to go to college. You can just Google it or learn about it, but it's a wonderful way, and grandparents can give to it too. It's not just one donor, but you can have several donors. There's tax advantages to it. The money accumulates, and you'll be in better shape. And you know, as Americans, we used to be a lot better at savings than we are now. I told you last week that in 1982, the average savings rate was 10% for American families, and now it's about 5% and dropping fast. How many of you remember war bonds here? Look at that. Yeah, again, at the second service, they won't know what I'm talking about, you know. But that created a habit, didn't it, for parents of baby boomers especially. I remember my mom, when we'd go into the local bank after she got her paycheck from the school, she always bought a $25 bond for the future, and she always put some money in my passbook savings for college. And there was enough there when I went off to school. But we have kind of forgotten how to do that, and we need to relearn it, I think. And how we spend or how we save really is linked back to our sense of purpose or calling in life. The very first pages of the Bible says that we are called to have dominion over the birds of the air and the fish of the sea and over all the living things, or to care for creation. How do we do that today? Well, we used to go to Yellowstone National Park or Rocky Mountain or some of these and learned that these places aren't free and they need our support to do what they do. And so we, as a family, decided to give a little bit each month to Yellowstone, to that foundation. And that feels good when I write that little check that somebody out there is getting a little extra help to care for the bison and the elk and everything else. Or maybe you could join the Sierra Club or the Wilderness Society. We've belonged to that too over the years. We're created to care for our own families, and I think you do a very good job at that. That's really your first priority in life. But we're also called and created to care for those in need, to love our neighbor as ourselves. In our house, we give monthly to Marion Cares and Habitat for Humanity to help them do their job better. And you know, if you give a little bit each month, it really adds up. Rather than waiting until December and you get these letters, you know, you're going to get them in your mail from every place under the sun. Every nonprofit wants your end of year giving. But if you give each month a little bit, like $10 or $20, you don't have to worry about those letters at the end of the year or feel guilty that you can't give to them. Our life purpose is not to consume as much as we possibly can until we die. We have a much higher purpose than that, don't we? When God called Abraham to be the father of a nation, he said he would be blessed to be a blessing. And for those of us who have good jobs or are living a pretty comfortable retirement, this is your purpose. You have been blessed to be a blessing. Barbara Glantz is a motivational speaker who travels around talking to large corporations. And one time she was speaking to a large supermarket chain and talked to everybody there, from the checkers to the stockers to the top people, about how underneath whatever you're doing, there is a deeper purpose, and is to be a blessing to others. And one of the people there listening went home and thought, what could I do to be a blessing to others? And let's hear his story now as we close, if we can catch the lights. Quite something, isn't it? And I want to, before I move on to the next song, thank Sarah Lagore, who I think is over here. Or did she just step out? Okay. And somebody had to go to the bathroom. And Alan Glen Angel, you want to stand up here? Because they're the ones that created these beautiful brochures that are in your packets today. So thank you for that. Yeah, let's thank them. Please stand as we sing our hymn of the day.